Alright, we're going to talk politics in this video. And I don't talk politics that much on this channel. It's sort of becoming like a meta discussion channel. So politics, okay. So if you're around my age, if you're in your 30s, so meaning you grew up in like late 90s, early 2000s, that's when you were coming of age. Republican and Democratic Party, I believe since then, on a number of issues, have actually kind of changed positions. And this is important to understand because it's important to never be married to any one political party, right? Like, I think the idea of being like a registered Republican or a registered Democrat is just like really goofy, okay? But here's the thing. If you go back to like the Bush era, okay, like Bush 2, so George W. Bush, right? What was the Republican Party, okay? They were fiercely patriotic, okay? Like stupid, jingoistic, just dumb patriotic, right? This was like the Freedom Fries era, right? Which, you know, in hindsight, was just such a silly thing. They were overwhelmingly trustful of the government, right? Really, very much opposed to conspiracies, whether it was related to 9/11 or other things. You know, they wouldn't want to talk about big pharma or, you know, the military-industrial complex. Again, all this type of stuff was coming from the left. They also were corporatist in nature or just extremely pro big business, right? So it was always like, well, yeah, we're going to let these banks rape us because, you know, it's good for us because, you know, it trickle down, right? And I was very much like anti any social welfare programs, right? So like the idea of universal medicine was horrifying to them, like universal basic income, anything like that. We would never, ever, ever hear a Republican speak. They were also extremely pro-war, right? So like to be a Republican was to be in favor of constant, aggressive, proactive war, right? And the Democratic Party was basically the opposite of that, okay? Definitely more of like a moderate to, you know, somewhat left-leaning, but more populist in nature, right? Like actually sort of giving a shit about the middle class, general welfare of the public. Very skeptical, right? That's more what you had. Like when you go back to those early 2000s years, you had a Democratic Party that was very skeptical of the establishment, right? So you always hear them talking about big pharma. You'd always hear them talking about the military-industrial complex, right? Now, does that sound like today? Because that's what it was, right? But does that sound like today? No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all, right? That Republican Party that I described is very similar to today's Democratic Party, right? And I know there's going to be like some boomers who are going to say like, no, I'm still patriotic, and that's fine, right? Like whatever. But I would say even on that issue, which I might get some pushback on, I would still say when we're talking about patriotism instead of nationalism, right? Patriotism is commitment to the state. Nationalism is obviously a commitment to your nation, so to the people, right? Independent of the state. And I think Republicans or right-leaning people in general have become much more skeptical of the state, right? And with that, significantly less patriotic. But you all have these Democrats who just kind of squawk and go on and on and on about like our democracy, right? The importance of protecting the state, all this other nonsense. Which is nonsense, by the way. It was nonsense when the Republicans were saying it, and it's nonsense today. So I think it's just really fascinating to see the Republican Party kind of becoming a centrist populist party. And I would also argue that the Democratic Party becoming, and I get that this doesn't really match with a historical right wing, but within at least the modern era, kind of becoming a moderate to right-leaning party, right? They're extremely pro big business. They're extremely pro-war, right? Extremely statist, okay? And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see. But yeah, I think the takeaway should be just never be committed to a party at all, right? It's just silly. And for the most part, they kind of work in league. They work together for the same kind of stupid stuff. But I thought some of you might find that interesting. Anyway, that's all I got.